The stars burned cold and silent above Earth as the Velrath fleet emerged from hyperspace. 2,000 warships darkened the sky, each one bristling with weapons that humanity had never seen before. Admiral Xyrax stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on his view screen. He had conquered 100 worlds in his long career, and he expected this one to fall just as easily, Commander. Nathan Cole gripped the railing of the ESS Defiant as alarms screamed throughout the ship. He was 42 years old, a veteran of 20 years in Earth's space navy, and he had never seen anything like the force arrayed against them. Earth's entire defense fleet numbered just 300 ships. They were outnumbered nearly 7-1. All ships formed defensive line around the orbital stations. Came the voice of Admiral Patricia Howard over the fleet channel. Her voice was steady, but Nathan could hear the fear beneath it. They all knew what was coming. The first Velroth weapons fired, and the void lit up with streaks of burning plasma. Nathan watched in horror as the ESS Constellation, a cruiser he had served on 10 years ago, took a direct hit and broke apart. Escape pods scattered like seeds from a dying flower, but Velroth fighters swept through and destroyed them one by one. "Turn fire," Nathan ordered, his voice hoarse. "Everything we have." The Defiant's weapons spoke, sending missiles and railgun rounds toward the enemy fleet. They struck a Velroth destroyer, and Nathan felt a moment of hope as its shields flickered. But then the shields stabilized, and the destroyer continued forward as if nothing had happened. Lieutenant Amy Walsh looked up from her console, her young face pale with shock. "Sir, our weapons aren't getting through. Their shields are too strong." Nathan knew she was right. Earth's technology was simply not advanced enough. They had only made first contact with alien life 15 years ago, and in that time they had learned that the galaxy was a dangerous place. The Velrath Dominion had conquered 1,000 worlds over 10,000 years. Humanity was just the latest species to stand in their path. The battle lasted 3 hours, though it felt like an eternity. One by one, Earth's ships died. The orbital defense stations were reduced to twisted wreckage. The Defiant took hit after hit, and Nathan watched his crew fall around him. When the final order came to retreat, only 47 human ships remained operational. Nathan pulled his burning ship back toward the moon, joining the ragged survivors of humanity's greatest defeat. Behind them, Velrath landing craft descended toward Earth like a swarm of locusts. On the surface, President Laura Bennett watched the sky from a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was 55 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much in the past few hours. Around her, generals and advisors argued about what to do, but she already knew the answer. "We have to surrender," she said quietly. The room fell silent. General Marcus Cole, Nathan's older brother, stepped forward. His uniform was stained with dust from a collapsed building above ground. "Madam President, we can still fight." "Guerrilla warfare, resistance cells, and how many billions will die while we resist?" Laura asked. "They've already destroyed every major military installation. Our navy is gone. Our orbital defenses are gone. If we keep fighting, they will burn our cities from space." She stood and walked to the communications console. Her hands trembled as she opened a channel to the Velrath flagship. Admiral Xyrax appeared on the screen, his gray face twisted in what might have been amusement. The Velrath were tall beings with 4 arms and eyes that glowed faintly red. They had evolved as predators on a harsh world, and they had never lost their taste for conquest. "You wish to surrender?" Xyrax said. It was not a question. "I wish to discuss terms," Laura replied. "Terms that will spare my people unnecessary suffering." Xyrax laughed, a harsh sound that made everyone in the bunker flinch. "Your people are now property of the Velrath Dominion. You will provide labor for our mining operations. You will produce goods for our empire. You will obey, or you will die. Those are my terms." The occupation began within days. Velrath soldiers marched through the streets of every major city. Humans were classified and sorted according to their usefulness. The young and strong were sent to labor camps on Europa and Ganymede. The old and weak were simply discarded. Commander Nathan Cole was captured 3 weeks after the surrender. He had been trying to organize a resistance cell in the ruins of Seattle, When Velrath troops found his hiding place, they beat him savagely, then threw him on a transport bound for the labor camps. As the transport lifted off, Nathan pressed his face against the small window and watched Earth shrink below him. His heart burned with hatred, but beneath that hatred was something else. Something he had overheard in the final days before his capture. A rumor. A whisper passed between survivors who still dared to hope. Something about a secret project hidden in the outer solar system. Something the Velroth had not found. Nathan did not know if the rumor was true, but he held on to it like a drowning man holds onto a piece of driftwood. Because without hope, there was nothing left. Far beyond the orbit of Mars, past the asteroid belt, hidden in the shadow of Saturn's largest moon, Captain Daniel Harris stood in a massive underground hangar and looked up at the most powerful weapon ever built by human hands. The ESS Vengeance was 3 kilometers long. Its hull was made of materials that did not exist in any human database before 20 years ago. Its engines could bend space itself. Its weapons could crack a planet in half, and it was one of 7. 20 years before the Velroth arrived, a mining expedition had discovered something impossible buried in the asteroid series, an ancient warship. Millions of years old, built by a civilization that had long since vanished from the galaxy. The technology inside was beyond anything humanity could have imagined. Project Lazarus had been born in secret. Hidden shipyards were built on Titan, on Enceladus, on dozens of small moons that the Velrath had not bothered to survey. Thousands of engineers and scientists had worked for 2 decades to understand and replicate the alien technology. Daniel Harris was 60 years old now, but he had been part of the project since the beginning. He had been a young lieutenant when they first discovered the ancient wreck. He had dedicated his entire life to this moment. "Captain," said Chief Engineer Maria Santos, walking up beside him, "all 7 dreadnoughts are now fully operational. Power cores are stable. Weapon systems are online." Daniel nodded slowly. On Earth, his people were suffering under alien rule. His sister had died in the initial invasion. His nephews were somewhere in the labor camps if they were still alive at all. "What about crew?" he asked. "We have enough," Maria replied. "Survivors who escaped the occupation? Resistance fighters who made it to the outer system. They're all volunteers. They all want payback." Daniel placed his hand on the cold metal of the Vengeance's hull. He could feel a faint vibration, as if the ship itself was alive and waiting. "Then we begin final preparations," he said. "In 6 months, we take back our home." Above them, the 7 dreadnoughts waited in darkness. They had been built in secret, hidden from an enemy who believed humanity was already broken. They were the last hope of a conquered world, and soon, very soon, they would emerge from the void. 5 years passed under Velrath rule, and Earth became a world of shadows. The great cities that humanity had built over centuries were transformed into labor centers. Factories ran day and night, producing goods for the Dominion. The skies were always gray now, filled with smoke from the endless industrial operations. Samantha Pierce moved through the underground tunnels, beneath what had once been Chicago. She was 34 years old, with short dark hair and eyes that had learned to trust no one. Before the invasion, she had been a fighter pilot, one of the best in Earth's Navy. Now she was a ghost, a leader of the resistance who lived in darkness. "How many did we get out last night?" she asked the man walking beside her. Kevin Drake checked his worn datapad. He was a former engineer, thin and tired, with hands that shook slightly from years of malnutrition. 47. "All workers from the processing plant. We moved them to the safe house in the old subway station." Samantha nodded. 47 lives saved. It was not enough, could never be enough, but it was something. The resistance could not fight the Velrath directly. Their weapons were too primitive, their numbers too small. All they could do was save who they could and wait for the signal. The signal. Everyone in the resistance whispered about it. A message that would come from the outer solar system, telling them that the hidden fleet was ready. Telling them that the time had come to rise. Some people thought it was just a myth. A story that the resistance told to keep hope alive. Samantha had believed that herself, in her darkest moments. But then, she would remember her brother's final words before he died in the invasion. He had been a scientist, part of a secret project he could never discuss. "Don't give up," he had told her. "No matter what happens, don't give up. Help is coming." In orbit above Earth, Governor Thraxus looked down at the conquered planet with satisfaction. He was a high-ranking Velrath noble, given this world as a reward for his service to the Dominion. The humans had been easy to break, just as he had expected. They were soft creatures, dependent on their technology and the comfortable lives. Take those away, and they became obedient slaves. Production is up 12% this quarter, reported his aide. A younger Velrath, named Corax. The labor camps on Europa have exceeded their mining quotas for the third month in a row. Thraxus made a sound of approval. And the resistance? Minor annoyances. They rescue a few workers here and there, spread some propaganda. Nothing significant. We eliminated 2 of their cells last month. Could keep the pressure on them. I want these humans completely broken within another 5 years. No spirit of rebellion left at all. On the frozen moon of Europa, Nathan Cole swung his pickaxe into the ice for the 10,000th time that day. His hands were raw and bleeding, his back screamed with pain, and he could barely feel his feet in the thin boots the Velroth provided. Around him, hundreds of other prisoners worked in the open pit mine. Extracting valuable minerals from Europa's crust, the guards watched from heated platforms above, their weapons ready to cut down anyone who slowed their pace. Nathan had seen it happen dozens of times. A worker would collapse from exhaustion, and the guards would simply shoot them and move on. But Nathan Cole did not collapse. He had not collapsed in 5 years. Because every night, when he lay in his freezing bunk with the other prisoners, he dreamed of fire. Fire raining down on Velrath ships, fire burning through the heart of the Dominion. The rumor he had heard before his capture had grown stronger over the years. Other prisoners whispered about it. A secret fleet hidden somewhere in the outer system. Ships unlike anything the Velrath had ever seen. Some said there were 3 ships. Others said 7. A few claimed there were dozens. Nathan did not know which rumors were true. But he kept working, kept surviving, kept waiting. Because if the fleet was real, he wanted to be alive to see it. On Titan, Captain Daniel Harris stood before a crowd of 2,000 volunteers. They had gathered in the vast hangar that held the ESS Vengeance, their faces lit by the soft glow of the ship's running lights. These were the survivors, the ones who had escaped the occupation and made the long journey to the outer system. Some were soldiers. Some were scientists. Some were just ordinary people who refused to accept defeat. "In 3 days," Daniel said, his voice echoing through the hangar, "we will leave this moon. We will travel to Earth, and we will begin the liberation of our world." A murmur ran through the crowd. Daniel waited for it to fade before continuing. "I will not lie to you. This will not be easy. The Velroth have a garrison of 50 ships in Earth orbit. They have ground forces on every continent. They have held our world for 5 years, and they believe we are broken." He paused, letting his words sink in. "They are wrong." Behind him, the massive form of the Vengeance seemed to pulse with energy. The other 6 dreadnoughts waited in hangars across Titan and the other hidden facilities. 7 ships against the might of the Velrath Dominion. It seemed impossible, but Daniel had seen what these ships could do. He had watched the test firings, seen the power that the ancient technology could unleash. The Velroth had never faced anything like this. No one in the galaxy had. "Each of you has lost something to the Velrath," he continued. "Family, friends, your homes, your world. I cannot promise to give all of that back, but I can promise you this: the Velrath will pay for what they have done, and humanity will never be conquered again." The crowd erupted in cheers. Daniel let the sound wash over him, feeling the hope and the anger and the determination of his people. They had been preparing for this moment for 20 years. Now, finally, the time had come. Chief Engineer Maria Santos approached him after the crowd dispersed. Her face was serious. "Keth Confederacy sent another message," she said quietly. "They want to know if we're really going to do this. Daniel nodded. The Keth were an alien species that had been fighting the Velrath for decades. They had been skeptical when Daniel first contacted them, unable to believe that the conquered humans had any cards left to play. But they were desperate, losing their long war against the Dominion. Desperate enough to listen. "Tell them we launch in 3 days," Daniel said. "Tell them to be ready to move when the Valrath pulls ships from their front." Maria hesitated. "And if this doesn't work? If the Velrath are stronger than we expect?" Daniel looked up at the Vengeance, at the ancient alien technology that humanity had spent 2 decades learning to use. Somewhere out there, his people were suffering, dying in labor camps, living under the boot of alien overlords. "It has to work," he said simply, "because there is no other choice." In the tunnels beneath Chicago, Samantha Pierce received a coded message on a hidden frequency. Her hands trembled as she decoded it, hardly daring to believe what she was reading. "What does it say?" Kevin asked. Samantha looked up, and for the first time in 5 years, she smiled. "It says the ghosts are waking up. It says to prepare for liberation." Kevin stared at her. "You mean it's real? The hidden fleet? It's real, and they're coming." She stood and walked to the communication console that linked the resistance cells across the planet. It was time to spread the word. It was time to prepare. The long night was almost over, and somewhere in the darkness beyond Saturn, 7 dreadnoughts were beginning to move. The morning of liberation began like every other morning under Velrath rule. In the cities of Earth, humans woke to the sound of factory sirens calling them to work. In the labor camps of Europa and Ganymede, prisoners lined up for their meager rations before another day of brutal labor. The guards watched with bored indifference. The Valrath had grown comfortable in their conquest. Governor Thraxus was enjoying his morning meal when his communications officer burst into the chamber. The young Velrath's face had turned pale gray, a sign of extreme fear among their species. "Governor, we have a situation." Thraxus looked up slowly, annoyed at the interruption. "What kind of situation?" "Our sensors have detected energy signatures emerging from behind Titan. 7 vessels. Each one is larger than anything in our database." Thraxus set down his eating utensil. "Larger than our battleships. Larger than anything we have ever encountered, Governor. The energy readings are impossible." In orbit, the 50 ships of the Velrath garrison scrambled to battle stations. Commanders shouted orders as their crews rushed to their positions. On view screens across the fleet, the sensor data told a story that none of them could believe. 7 vessels were approaching Earth at high speed. Each one measured approximately 3 kilometers in length. Their power signatures were off the scale, and they were definitely human in design. Captain Verak of the Velrath cruiser. Dominance stared at his tactical display with growing horror. "Where did they come from?" he demanded. "We scanned the entire system when we conquered this world. There were no ships like these." "Unknown, Captain," his sensor officer replied. "They appear to have been hidden in the outer system. Our initial surveys did not detect them, because they were buried underground," Varric realized. "Hidden in facilities we never thought to look for. The humans had been building these things for years, perhaps decades, and we never knew." On the bridge of the ESS Vengeance, Captain Daniel Harris watched Earth grow larger on his view screen. The blue and green planet, now scarred with gray patches from 5 years of industrial exploitation, filled him with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "All ships. Report status," he said calmly, one by one. The captains of the other 6 dreadnoughts checked in. The Retribution, commanded by Captain Lisa Monroe. The Defiance under Captain Greg Palmer. The Liberty, led by Captain Rachel Morrison. The Justice, commanded by Captain Victor Chen. The Fury, under Captain Angela Hayes, and the Hope, led by Captain Paul Richardson. 7 ships. 7 captains. The last hope of humanity. "Enemy fleet is forming a defensive line between us and Earth," reported Lieutenant Eric Palmer, Daniel's tactical officer. 50 vessels. They're charging weapons." Daniel nodded. He had expected this. The Valrath garrison would not simply flee. They would fight because they could not imagine losing. "Open a channel to all frequencies," Daniel ordered. I want every human on Earth to see this." The communications officer worked quickly, and within moments, Daniel's face appeared on every screen on the planet. In factories and work camps, in resistance hideouts and Velrath administrative centers, people stopped what they were doing and stared. "People of Earth," Daniel said, his voice calm and steady. "My name is Captain Daniel Harris of the Earthship Vengeance. For 5 years, you have lived under Velrath's occupation. You have been told that resistance was hopeless. You have been told that humanity was broken. Today, we prove them wrong." In the tunnels beneath Chicago, Samantha Pierce watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her face. Around her, resistance fighters embraced each other, laughing and crying at the same time. In the labor camp on Europa, Nathine Cole stood frozen before a small screen that someone had smuggled into the barracks. The guards had not noticed the broadcast yet. They would soon, but for this moment, Nathan and his fellow prisoners watched in stunned silence. "The Velrath thought they had conquered us," Daniel continued. "They were wrong. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not break. And today, humanity takes back its home." He turned to his tactical officer. "All ships, engage the enemy." The 7 dreadnoughts accelerated toward the Velrath defensive line. The alien ships opened fire immediately, sending waves of plasma bolts and missiles toward the approaching vessels. The weapons that had destroyed Earth's original navy, that had conquered 1,000 worlds across the galaxy, streaked through space toward the human ships, and then something remarkable happened. The weapons struck the dreadnoughts' shields and simply vanished, absorbed, nullified the energy that should have torn the ships apart was swallowed by defensive systems that the Velrath could not understand. Captain Varrock watched in disbelief as his weapons had no effect. "Increase power to all batteries," he ordered frantically. "Focus fire on the lead vessel." Every ship in the Velrath fleet concentrated their fire on the Vengeance. The space around Daniel's ship lit up with explosions and energy discharges. On the bridge, officers worked calmly at their stations, monitoring systems that showed no strain at all. "Shield capacity at 98%, reported the tactical officer. "Their weapons are not penetrating." Daniel nodded. "Return fire. Main cannon, target the enemy flagship." The Vengeance's primary weapon, a massive energy projector that ran the entire length of the ship, powered up. The ancient technology hummed with power that humanity had only begun to understand. And then it fired. A beam of concentrated energy, blue-white and impossibly bright, lanced across space. It struck Captain Varrock's cruiser dead center. The Dominance did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive warship bristling with weapons. The next moment, there was nothing but expanding gas and debris. Silence fell across the Velrath fleet. In that moment, every alien commander understood that they were facing something beyond their experience, something they could not defeat. "All dreadnoughts engage at will," Daniel ordered. The other 6 ships opened fire. The Retribution destroyed 2 destroyers with a single shot. The Defiance tore through a cruiser's hull like it was made of paper. The Liberty, the Justice, the Fury, and the Hope each selected their targets and eliminated them with terrifying efficiency. The Velrath broke. Ships that had never known defeat began turning to flee, their commanders desperate to escape the slaughter. But the dreadnoughts were faster. They ran down the fleeing vessels one by one, destroying them before they could reach the jump point. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Velrath garrison was reduced to debris. On Earth, people poured into the streets. They looked up at the sky, where the flashes of distant explosions were visible even in daylight. They did not fully understand what was happening. But they understood one thing. The Velrath were losing. Governor Thraxus watched the tactical display with growing horror. His entire garrison, 50 of the Dominion's finest warships, had been annihilated. And now 7 human vessels were approaching Earth, their weapons powered and ready. "We need to evacuate," his aide, Korak, said urgently. "We need to reach the jump point before they block it." Thraxus shook his head slowly. He was a proud Velrath noble, and he had never run from anything in his life. But as he watched the dreadnoughts take up positions around his conquered world, he realized that pride meant nothing against this kind of power. "Prepare my shuttle," he ordered quietly. "We will report this to the Dominion. They will send reinforcements. They will crush these humans once and for all." As his shuttle lifted off from the surface, racing for the jump point, Thraxus looked back at the blue planet that had been his domain for 5 years. The humans had hidden their strength. They had waited in the shadows, building weapons that the Valrath could not imagine, and now they had emerged from the void. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Daniel Harris watched the last Valrath ship disappear into hyperspace. He let it go. He wanted the Dominion to know what had happened here. He wanted them to understand that humanity was no longer prey. "Contact the Resistance," he ordered. "Tell them liberation has begun." And on Earth, for the first time in 5 years, people dared to hope. The liberation of Earth took 23 days. It was not a simple matter of destroying the Valrath fleet. There were still thousands of alien soldiers on the ground, occupying cities and controlling the vast industrial complexes they had built. They had to be dealt with carefully because they held millions of human hostages. Captain Daniel Harris coordinated the campaign from orbit. Working closely with resistance leaders on the surface, the dreadnoughts could not simply bombard the enemy positions. Too many innocent lives would be lost. Instead, they provided support for the ground forces, using precise strikes to eliminate Valrath, command centers, and heavy weapons emplacements. Samantha Pierce led the assault on the Chicago Administrative Complex. She had spent 5 years hiding in the tunnels beneath this city, watching the Valrath walk its streets like they owned them. Now she moved through those same streets at the head of a resistance army, armed with weapons that had been smuggled in over years of patient preparation. "Move up on the left," she ordered through her communicator. "Kevin, take your team around to the service entrance." Kevin Drake acknowledged and led his squad toward the building. Above them, the ESS Defiance hovered like an avenging angel, its weapons trained on any Valrath position that tried to reinforce the complex. The battle was fierce but brief. The Valrath soldiers fought with desperate courage, knowing that surrender meant facing justice for 5 years of atrocities. But they were cut off from support, their communications jammed by the dreadnoughts, their heavy weapons destroyed by precise orbital strikes. When Samantha finally walked into the command center, she found the regional commander waiting for her with a weapon to his own head. He was a tall Valrath, his uniform stained with dust and blood from the fighting. "You cannot win," he said, his voice filled with hatred. "The Dominion will send a fleet. They will burn this world to ashes." Samantha raised her own weapon. "Maybe, but you won't be here to see it." The commander pressed the trigger before she could fire, choosing death over capture. Samantha felt nothing as she watched him fall. She had seen too much death in the past 5 years to be moved by one more. On Europa, the liberation came differently. The labor camps were spread across the frozen surface, and the Valrath guards had threatened to execute all prisoners if the human fleet approached. Captain Rachel Morrison of the ESS, Liberty devised a different approach. She landed a team of Special Forces operatives in the shadow of a large ice formation, then led a lightning assault on the camp's command center. The Valrath commanders died before they could issue the execution order. The guards, surrounded and outnumbered, surrendered within hours. Nathan Cole was working in the ice mine when the shooting started. He and the other prisoners huddled together, not knowing if this was a rescue or an execution. Then, a human soldier appeared at the entrance to the mine, her face covered by a combat helmet. "You're free," she said simply. "It's over." Nathan stared at her, unable to process the words. Free. He had spent 5 years in this frozen hell, swinging a pickaxe until his hands bled, watching friends die from exhaustion and exposure. And now it was over. He fell to his knees and wept. The camps on Ganymede and Callisto were liberated in similar fashion. Thousands of prisoners were rescued, though many more had died during the years of occupation. The survivors were transported to Earth, where medical teams worked around the clock to treat their injuries and malnutrition. In orbit, Captain Daniel Harris received reports from across the solar system. Every Valrath installation had been destroyed or captured. Every human slave had been freed, The occupation was over, but Daniel knew this was only the beginning. "We need to talk about what comes next," he said during a council meeting aboard the Vengeance. The captains of the other 6 dreadnoughts attended via holographic link, their images flickering slightly in the dim light of the conference room. Captain Lisa Monroe of the Retribution spoke first. "The Velrath will send a fleet. A real fleet, not the garrison force they left here. We destroyed 50 ships today. They have thousands. Which is why we need allies," Daniel replied. He pulled up a star map showing the region of space controlled by the Velrath Dominion. It was vast, spanning hundreds of star systems. But there were other colors on the map, other powers that bordered Velrath territory. "The Keth Confederacy has been fighting the Dominion for 60 years, he continued. "They're losing, but they're still fighting. Beyond them, there are a dozen other species that the Velrath have conquered or threatened. If we can unite them, we might have a chance." Captain Victor Chen of the Justice shook his head. "They'll never trust us. We were conquered in 3 hours. Why would they believe we can help them?" Daniel smiled grimly. "Because we have something they don't. We have technology that can stand against the Velrath, and we just proved it works." He sent a secure communication to the Keth High Command requesting a meeting. To his surprise, the response came within hours. The Keth wanted to talk. High Commander Veth of the Keth Confederacy was an imposing figure, even as a holographic image. His species resembled tall, slender humanoids with silver skin and large dark eyes. They had been spacefaring for millennia, and they had never encountered a species quite like humanity.
Ow.
"You destroyed 50 Velrath warships," Veth said, his voice flat and emotionless. "With 7 vessels. How is this possible?" Daniel told him the story. The ancient wreck discovered on Ceres, the 20 years of secret research, the construction of the dreadnoughts in hidden facilities across the outer solar system. Veth listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When Daniel finished, the Keth commander was quiet for a long moment. "You hid this from the Velrath for 20 years, he finally said. "You let them conquer your world, let them enslave your people, rather than reveal your true strength too early. That is impressive discipline." "It was not a choice we made lightly," Daniel replied. "But we knew that if we fought too soon, we would lose. We had to wait until we were ready. And now you wish to form an alliance. The Velrath will come for us with everything they have. We can hurt them badly, but we cannot defeat them alone. Neither can you. Together, we might have a chance." Veth considered this. The Keth had been fighting the Dominion for 60 years, and they were exhausted. Their fleets were diminished, their worlds threatened. They had nothing left to lose. "Very well, human. The Keth Confederacy will ally with Earth. Show us that your ships can do what you claim, and we will fight beside you." Daniel nodded. It was a start. Over the following weeks, other species joined the alliance. The Tyranni, who had lost 3 worlds to Velrath expansion. The Meketh, who had been paying tribute to the Dominion for a century. The Jinn, who had been hiding in the outer reaches of the galaxy, hoping to avoid the Dominion's attention. One by one, they came. United by hope. United by the impossible victory at Earth. On the surface, humanity began to rebuild. President Laura Bennett emerged from her bunker for the first time in 5 years, blinking in the sunlight. The world she found was scarred and broken, but it was free. "We have a lot of work to do," she said to the crowd that had gathered to see her. "We need to rebuild our cities, heal our wounded, bury our dead. But we will do it as free people. Never again will humanity bow to an alien master." The crowd cheered, and for a moment, Laura allowed herself to hope that the worst was behind them. But in the darkness, beyond the stars, Admiral Zyrex was already preparing his response. He had received Governor Thraxus's report. He had seen the recordings of the battle, and he was gathering the largest fleet the Velrath had assembled in 1,000 years. The liberation was complete, but the war was just beginning. Admiral Zyrax stood on the command deck of his flagship, Alces the Wrath of Dominion, watching the fleet assemble around him. 300 warships, pulled from the front lines of the war against the Keth. It was the largest force the Velrath had deployed in centuries. His second in command, Captain Morak, approached with a datapad. The fleet is ready, Admiral. All ships report full combat readiness. RX nodded slowly. He had conquered more worlds than he could count. He had never lost a battle in his long career. But the reports from Earth troubled him deeply. 7 ships, he muttered. 7 ships destroyed our entire garrison in minutes. Where did they come from? How did the humans hide this from us? Unknown, Admiral. Our intelligence failed to detect the construction facilities. Your intelligence was worthless, Xyrax snapped. We scanned that system when we conquered it. We found nothing. Because the humans had buried their secrets deep, he realized. They had known we would come, and they had prepared. For years, for decades, while we treated them as slaves, they were building weapons to destroy us. He turned back to the view screen. Earth waited at the end of this journey. Earth and 7 ships that had done the impossible. Set course for the Sol system, he ordered. Maximum speed. 3 months later, the Velarath fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Sensors immediately detected the human dreadnoughts in orbit around Earth, but they also detected something else. Admiral, the sensor officer reported, his voice trembling, the humans are not alone. Xyrax stared at the tactical display with growing horror. Alongside the 7 human dreadnoughts were dozens of other vessels. Keth battlecruisers, Tirani frigates, Mechith carriers, Jinn destroyers. A fleet assembled from a dozen different species, all united against the Velrath Dominion. Impossible, Xyrax breathed. The Keth would never ally with a conquered species, but the proof was right in front of him. The humans had done what the Velrath had always feared. They had united the galaxy's oppressed peoples into a single fighting force. On the bridge of the ESS Vengeance, Admiral Daniel Harris watched the Velrath fleet approach. He had been promoted after the liberation, given command of humanity's military forces. It was a burden he had not wanted, but one he could not refuse. 300 ships, reported Captain Lisa Monroe, who now served as his second-in-command. That's more than we expected. Daniel nodded. But fewer than they could have sent. They're still fighting the Keth on other fronts. They couldn't pull their entire fleet away. The alliance had cost the Velrath dearly. When Xyrax withdrew ships from the Keth front, the Confederacy had launched a major offensive. 3 Velrath worlds had fallen in the past month. The Dominion was fighting on multiple fronts now, stretched thin in ways they had never experienced before. Open a channel to the Velrath flagship, Daniel ordered. Xyrax's gray face appeared on the view screen. His red eyes burned with hatred. Admiral Harris, he said coldly, I should have destroyed your world when I had the chance. Instead, I was merciful. I allowed your people to live as slaves. And this is how you repay that mercy. Daniel met his gaze steadily. Mercy. You killed billions. You worked millions to death in your labor camps. You treated us like animals. You're animals. You are prey. And today, I will remind you of your place. You can try, Daniel replied. But before you do, let me offer you what you never offered us. Surrender now, withdraw your fleet, and we will let you leave in peace. Continue this war, and we will destroy you. Xyrax laughed, a harsh sound filled with contempt. Destroy us? You have 7 ships. Human. I have 300. Whatever tricks you used against our garrison will not save you today. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. We shall see. He closed the channel and turned to his tactical officer. All ships, battle formation. Let's show them what humanity can do. The 2 fleets closed on each other above the blue marble of Earth. On the surface, billions watched the sky. Knowing that the future of their world depended on the battle about to unfold, Admiral Xyrax ordered the first attack. A wave of missiles and plasma bolts streaked toward the Alliance fleet. The Keth ships moved to intercept, their own weapons firing in response. Space lit up with explosions as the 2 forces clashed, but at the center of the formation, the 7 human dreadnoughts advanced untouched. The Velrath weapons splashed against their shields like rain against a mountain. And then the dreadnoughts fired back. The Vengeance's main cannon struck a Velrath battleship and vaporized it instantly. The Retribution destroyed 2 cruisers with a single beam. The Defiance, Liberty, Justice, Fury, and Hope each selected their targets and eliminated them with cold precision in less than 5 minutes. The Velroth had lost 30 ships. Their fleet formation began to waver. "Admiral, we cannot penetrate their shields," Captain Morok reported desperately. "Our weapons have no effect on those vessels." Xyrax watched ship after ship die on his tactical display. He had never seen anything like this. The human dreadnoughts moved through his fleet like predators among prey, destroying everything in their path. "Concentrate fire on the Allied vessels," he ordered. "Ignore the dreadnoughts. Target the Keth." It was a desperate gamble. The Velrath could not hurt the dreadnoughts, but they could hurt the Alliance's conventional ships. If they could destroy enough of them, perhaps the humans would be forced to retreat. But Daniel had anticipated this. "All dreadnoughts moved to protect our allies." Shield formation. Now the 7 dreadnoughts spread out, positioning themselves between the Velrath and the Allied fleet. Their shields extended outward, creating overlapping fields of protection. Velrath weapons that would have destroyed Keth cruisers instead dissipated. Harmlessly against the human barriers, High Commander Veth watched from his flagship. Now the Keth pride was something approaching. He had fought the Velrath for 60 years. He had never seen them lose. But today, they were being systematically destroyed by 7 ships and their remarkable human commanders. "All Keth vessels, advance," he ordered. "Support the human fleet." The Meketh and Tirani and Jin followed, pressing the attack. The Velrath fleet, caught between the devastating power of the dreadnoughts and the combined might of the Alliance, began to crumble. Admiral Xyrax stood on his bridge as his fleet died around him. 100 ships gone. 150. 200. His flagship shook as weapons struck its shields, and he knew that the end was near. "Sir, we need to retreat," Morak urged. "We can jump to hyperspace, regroup, retreat." Xyrax turned to face him, his eyes blazing. "I am Admiral Xyrax of the Velrath Dominion. I have never retreated from anything." A beam from the ESS Vengeance struck the Wrath of Dominion's bridge. The shields held, barely, but systems began to fail across the ship. "Admiral, shields are failing. We cannot survive another hit." Xyrax looked at the view screen, at the human dreadnoughts that had destroyed everything he had built. He had underestimated these creatures. He had thought them weak, broken, incapable of fighting back. He had been wrong. "Send a message to the Dominion," he said quietly. "Tell them that Earth is lost. Tell them that humanity is more dangerous than we ever imagined. Tell them." Another beam struck the flagship. The shields failed completely. And Admiral Xyrax, conqueror of 100 worlds, died in the fire of his own arrogance. The battle ended 2 hours after it began. Of the 300 Velrath warships, only 23 escaped to hyperspace. The rest were destroyed or captured. Admiral Daniel Harris watched the survivors flee into the darkness, knowing that they would carry word of this defeat back to the Dominion. "It's over," Lisa Monroe said quietly. "We won." Daniel shook his head. "This battle is over, but the war will continue. The Velrath will send more ships. They'll fight harder. They'll try to destroy us before we can grow stronger." "And will they succeed?" Daniel looked at the Allied fleet arrayed around him. Humans and Keth and Tirani and Meketh and Jin, united against a common enemy. A year ago, such an alliance would have been unthinkable. Now it was reality. "No," he said, "they will not." 6 months later, the Alliance liberated the first Velrath subject world. A year after that, they had freed a dozen more. The Dominion, which had ruled unchallenged for millennia, began to crumble from within. Species that had been crushed for centuries rose up, inspired by humanity's example, on the 5th anniversary of liberation. President Laura Bennett addressed a crowd of millions in the rebuilt city of New York. Behind her, an image of the 7 dreadnoughts filled the sky. "They thought the war was won," she said. "They thought we were broken. But humanity has never been good at accepting defeat. We waited, We prepared. And when the moment came, we emerged from the void to reclaim our world. She paused, looking out at the faces of her people. Young and old, scarred by occupation, but unbroken in spirit. Let this be a lesson to anyone who would threaten our world. Humanity may fall, but we always get back up. And we never, ever forget. In the crowd, Nathan Cole stood beside Amy Walsh. They had both survived the invasion, the occupation, and the liberation. They had watched humanity at its lowest point, and now they were watching it rise to heights no one had ever imagined. "What do you think happens now?" Amy asked. Nathan looked up at the sky, where the ESS Hope orbited in silent vigil over the world it had helped save. "Now we build," he said. "We grow stronger. We make sure this never happens again." Amy nodded, and they stood together in silence, watching the sun set over a world that was finally, truly free. The end.